Bella wants to know if somebody can send her the live stream for the town hall.
We're not live yet. It's coming.
No, but Bella wants to know how to connect. Do you know
I just got the same message.
We're live.
Good evening, everyone. In consideration of the current COVID-19 provincial and public health orders prohibiting public gatherings of more than 5 people and requirements for physical distancing between persons, in-person attendance at this special council meeting will not be permitted. Members of the public can access a copy of the agenda as well as draft minutes from the Town of Shelburne website or watch the council meeting video from the town's YouTube channel. Correspondence related to the agenda business may be submitted by email to the clerk at jwilloughby@shelburne.ca, and this document can be made available in other accessible formats and with communication supports as soon as practicable and upon request. So with that, I will call the meeting to order and ask if there are any disclosures of pecuniary interest from any member of council. Don't see any. So we have a couple of proclamations this evening. One is for Pride Month, and the second was at the request of Councillor Wagner. That request came in just after the agenda was live, so it's not listed on the agenda, but we're also going to proclaim June 21st as Indigenous Peoples Day. So starting with Pride Month, whereas every year cities around the world celebrate the diversity that strengthens our town to commemorate and support sexual and gender minorities liberation. And whereas Pride Month is a positive stance against discrimination and violence towards lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and queer people to promote their self-affirmation, dignity, equality, rights, increase their visibility as a social group, build community, and celebrate sexual diversity and gender variance. And whereas the rainbow flag is the most recognized LGBTQ symbol designed in 1978, and whereas Pride Month in Shelburne is an opportunity to prevent discrimination and promote awareness and acceptance of every human person, and to promote the development of harmonious relationships amongst all members of the community. And whereas we support an inclusive and respectful community where all citizens can live, work, and play in a safe and secure environment. Now, therefore, I, Mayor Wade Mills, do hereby proclaim June 2020 as Pride Month in the town of Shelburne. And secondly, whereas June 21st, Canada will celebrate Indigenous Peoples Day. This is a day for all Canadians to acknowledge the unique heritage, diverse cultures, and outstanding contributions of First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. And whereas in cooperation with Indigenous organizations, the Government of Canada chose June 21st, the summer solstice for National Aboriginal Day, now known as National Indigenous Peoples Day. And whereas for generations, many Indigenous peoples and communities have celebrated their culture and heritage on or near this day due to the significance of the summer solstice and the longest day of the year. And whereas Shelburne is home to a strong Indigenous community and would like to acknowledge their continued contributions, now therefore, I, Mayor Wade Mills, on behalf of the Council of the Town of Shelburne, do hereby proclaim June 21st, 2020 as Indigenous Peoples Day in the town of Shelburne. So thank you, Councillor Wagner, for raising that. Now, before we begin with Council's indulgence, I would just like to take a moment to reflect upon some of the events that we're witnessing in response to the death of George Floyd specifically, but also in response to racism more generally. Last week, as you may know, I offered some thoughts on this by way of a video message to the community. And as part of that message, I acknowledged that personally, there is certainly more that I can and should be doing to address this issue head on. And I suggested that in fact, all of us, can do better when it comes to tackling racism. There's a reckoning that's taking place right now, and I think that's clear to anybody who's been following the news. And we all have a role to play in that. It's been said that it's the silence of friends and not the words of enemies that ultimately allows racism to flourish and to exist. So with that in mind, I would ask that all of us take part in this effort to root out and ultimately destroy racism where it exists. And I would ask that we start by doing that within our own community. To do that, there's certainly going to be the need for some frank discussion and a willingness to listen with the intent of understanding. But there's also going to be a need for action, a need for specific and measurable deeds that are designed to not only address systemic racism and ultimately overcome it, but also to have those uncomfortable conversations and understand what this is all about. I'd like to assure the community that personally I am committed to doing this. I've spoken at length with the deputy mayor about this, and I know that he plans on raising this later in the agenda this evening through a proposal of one such specific course of action. And I know that he's given this a lot of thought. And I would ask for council support in this initiative, and I certainly think that a unanimous show of support would send a strong symbolic message to the community that we are united in this cause. Finally, as likely all of you know by now, there is a peaceful demonstration that's being planned for this coming Sunday, the 14th, at 1 p.m. I've spoken to the organizers of this initiative, and I'd like to thank them for their leadership. I've told them that I will be in attendance, and I certainly hope that it results in a productive and peaceful manifestation of what this community stands for and our level of commitment rather to this cause. So thank you for the indulgence on that, and we will get started on the agenda. So item number 2 is minutes from the special council meetings held May the 11th, 13th, and 25th. I'd look for a mover and a second for the motion that reads, be it resolved that the minutes from the meetings held May 11th, 13th, and 25th, 2020 be approved. Moved by Councillor Bernardo, seconded by Councillor Fegan. Any discussion on those minutes? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That's carried. Okay, so that brings us to our presentation from BDO. So we have Tracy Smith and Angela Nickel joining us to review our 2019 financial statements. Hi, guys.
Hello, can everyone hear me okay?
Yeah.
All right,
We're good.
that's great. I'd like to thank the council for inviting us to your virtual meeting here tonight. I'm Tracy Smith and I'm a partner with BDO. I've taken on the engagement partner role with the retirement of Sally Slumpsky. So I've been working with municipalities for over 30 years at BDO, and I'm currently the engagement partner for 16 municipalities in Grey Bruce, Dufferin, and Simcoe counties. Also attending the meeting from BDO is Angela Nickel, the senior manager, who worked closely with your management team during the audit. So we would like to thank Carrie and Marion and their team for the assistance that they provided to us during the audit. We appreciate all the support and help that they did. We do have a PowerPoint presentation. Are we going to be able to bring that to the screen?
I think Jennifer's just working on that now.
I've shared my screen. Can you see it?
I'm seeing the just the file folder. I don't see a presentation up.
Let me try again. Can you see it now?
No.
No.
It's in PDF, so I'm wondering if we're not able to share a PDF.
Jennifer, are you sharing or splitting your screen possibly? Because it looks like we're looking at one side of the screen, potentially a second screen is open.
It's either that or open it in the actual program.
Jennifer, I also have the actual presentation if that's easier.
Can you try sharing your screen?
I can.
There we go.
There we go. And Angela, you'll just have to take the notes off. There we go. Perfect. Okay, so I will present a short high-level overview of the auditor's report and portions of the draft financial statements. A full complete copy of the financial statements, I believe, has been provided in your council package. The statements are in draft and they need to be approved by council before they can be released in final. Angela will then present some highlights of the municipality's performance using some graphical analysis, and she'll also summarize the auditor's communication to the council. Since we're having to use virtual technology, we'll answer any questions at the end of the presentation, if that's okay. So moving on to the independent auditor's report. Management is responsible for preparing the financial statements. It's our responsibility as your auditors to give an opinion on the financial statements prepared by management. So an audit opinion is the highest level of assurance that we can provide as public accountants. And we obtain sufficient and appropriate audit evidence to provide an unqualified opinion. So our opinion is in the second paragraph. In our opinion, the financial statements were presented fairly in all material respects in accordance with Canadian public sector accounting standards, which basically means we didn't find any issues during the audit and we give a clean opinion. The audit report then goes on in significant detail about the responsibilities of management and those charged with governance. And on the next page, the audit report clarifies the responsibilities of the auditor. So the format changed last year to this much longer version. However, it still is a clean opinion, and it will be dated today if the council approves the financial statements. The financial statements, they're prepared on a consolidated basis. Therefore, 100% of the assets, liabilities, revenues, and expenses are included for the Shelburne Public Library, the Shelburne Business Improvement Area, and the Center Dufferin Recreational Complex. The financial statements, they also include Shelburne's 52.74% share of the Shelburne Fire Department. So a separate review engagement report was prepared for the library, for the fire department, and also for Center Dufferin Recreation. And a notice to reader report was prepared for the BIA. Now, if we can turn right to the statements with the numbers, the statement of financial position or the balance sheet is at a point in time at December 31st, 2019. The assets, you'll note there was an increase in cash of $3.8 million. It went from 12.9 to 16.7 million. And that's a direct result of your increase in your reserves. You had $3 million in reserves. You also had $1.4 million increase in obligatory reserves. And that was offset by paying down your external debt of $422,000. The obligatory reserves, they're made up of your development charges and your gas tax funds. And they're only recognized as revenue when that money is spent. So the unspent amounts show on your balance sheet there as in the liability section. You can see the unspent portion increased from 6.4 to 5 million in the liability section. So that extra unspent portion is sitting in your cash, and that's contributed to the increase in cash. The liabilities, the significant liabilities are the deferred revenue, as we just discussed, of 6.4 million. You also have external long-term debt of 4.8 million, of which you paid off 422,000 during the year. So then you come down to your net financial assets, and this is a key financial indicator. So it's the total of your assets less your liabilities. So a positive number means you have resources available for the future. The net financial assets increases when you increase your reserves and when you pay off the debt. The non-financial assets includes your physical capital assets, your roads, your buildings, your sewer and water systems, your equipment, and that's reported at cost less amortization. which is an estimate of the use over time. So it's important to note that those capital assets are recorded at cost and not replacement cost. So there would be a significant increase in the amount to replace those capital assets. The net decrease in tangible capital assets reflects additions of 1.6 million, including 755,000 that was received in contributed assets. So that was, you didn't pay that in cash. Those assets were contributed to the municipality. Therefore, your assets are actually aging faster than they're being replaced. And then you come down to your accumulated surplus is the equity of the town, and it includes both your monetary and your physical assets for a total of $71.8 million. So that's the statement of financial position. The next statement is the statement of operations and accumulated surplus, and this reports all your transactions during the year. It is again on a consolidated basis, so it includes the library, the DIA, the rec complex, and your share of the fire. The revenues totaled $15 million and include taxes, user fees for various services, grants, and other revenue. Included in the revenue are all your external revenue sources of revenue for operating and capital costs. It does not include any transfers from reserves. So the most significant change was in your other revenues, and this related to the contributed assets. In the prior year, in 2018, you had $2.5 million contributed in capital assets and only $755,000 in 2019. Your sewer and water fees, they are included in your fees and user charges, and they were the most significant increase with $200,000. The expenses include all your operating costs, such as payroll, supplies, services, interest, and it's presented by function. For example, the environmental services would include water and sewer. The expenses also include amortization, which is the estimate of the wear and tear on your physical assets from their use. The budgeted expenses have been adjusted to include amortization so that you're able to compare the budget amount in column 1 there to the actual amounts in column 2. What's not included in these expenses is your actual physical purchase of the capital assets, and it also doesn't include any transfers to reserves. The total revenue less total expenses for the year comes down to what's reflected on the statement as your annual surplus. So your annual surplus was $2.4 million. So it's important to note that that annual surplus is not your operating surplus. The operating surplus for the year was $527,052, and that was transferred to reserves as approved by council. So the annual surplus that you see on this statement is the amount that you've raised during the year from external sources after paying your operating costs and covering amortization. So so you want to see this number as always a very positive number, and you want to see it as a large positive number because you need enough funds raised externally every year to pay down your debt. So from this annual surplus, this 2.4, if we go to the next statement starts with that $2.4 million in annual surplus. And then we add back the amortization, and we deduct the actual capital purchases during the year of $1.6 million. So this statement then comes down to the increase in net financial assets. So this number, this increase in net financial assets, that cannot be either positive or negative. And positive doesn't mean it's good, and negative doesn't mean it's necessarily bad. What you need to look at on this statement is how you budgeted and how that compares to your actual number. So you budgeted to kind of basically break even of $138,234, and you actually ended up with an increase in financial assets of just over $3 million. So if you look up at your capital assets, you actually budgeted for 2.9 million to be spent on capital assets, and you only spent 1.6. So you were actually, you put more into reserves than you had budgeted for. So the last statement that we have is your statement of cash flows. So this is the activity in the cash, in your actual physical cash and your bank accounts. So you'll see in the middle of the page there, you had cash flow from operations of approximately $5.2 million. You had cash flows out to purchase capital assets of $897,000. And you had cash flows out to repay your external debt of $422,000. So you actually had a net increase in cash of $3.8 million during the year. So those are the main statements. And I'm just, as I said, doing a very high level overview of your financial statements. You do have the complete package. The last thing I'm going to focus on is we do have included in here an excerpt of note 7, which is on page 17 of your financial statements. So this is the accumulated surplus note, and it provides details of where of the accumulated surplus of 71.8 million that you saw at the bottom of the balance sheet, the first statement that we looked at. This note we like to highlight because this is the only place in your financial statements that you would find that operating surplus or an operating deficit if you had a deficit for the year. The town did have an operating surplus of $527,052, and however, you don't see it in the note because it is already transferred to reserves and is included in that $11.5 million of your reserves. The other thing that you'll find on this statement is you're invested in capital assets of $61.1 million. So that's the amount that you've invested in your capital assets at cost, less amortization, less the debt that was used to finance those capital assets. So the net amount that you've invested in your physical assets. It also includes the unfunded solid waste closure and land closure liability. And so that's an estimate of the future costs that will be funded on an annual basis as the actual costs are incurred. And they also have the unfunded post-employment benefits. Again, those are estimates of future costs based on actuarial valuations. So you'll fund those on an annual basis as the actual costs are incurred. So I'm going to turn it over now to Angela to look at provide you some more details and some financial highlights as she looks at these numbers in a more graphical format.
So just kind of breakdown of your long-term debt. So you'll see that your long-term debt increased in 2016, which is due to the 2 new loans funding the Sister Street and your new well. And since then, it's been kind of decreasing steadily as you guys have repaid that long-term debt. So this is your reserves and your discretionary reserve funds for the past 5 years. And as you can see, you have been kind of steadily building up these reserves. Most of that kind of comes from operating surpluses in both your general, operating surplus as well as environmental. So the big change between this year and last is in your water and sewer surpluses, and kind of see those big spikes in that purple bar. So this is your obligatory reserve funds, and it's remained mostly steady over the past 5 years. You do see that kind of larger spike in this year, and that is due to an increase in both gas tax funding as well as development charges received but not spent this year. So this is your kind of revenue, sources of revenue for the past So 15 at the very top and then 19 at the bottom. So the sources of revenue are pretty consistent between these 2 years. Keeping in mind that the growth, like the total revenue has increased between these two, both 15 and up to 19. So just a couple of highlights. So grants have decreased from 27% of revenue to only 13% in the current year. And as well, user fees and was 23% in 2015 and is increased to about 29% in 2019, which is mainly just due to an increase in water and sewer rates and just kind of the base of that water and sewer. So this kind of shows your operating grants for, again, the past 5 years. So you'll see a decrease in the OMPF grant pretty much every single year. And you'll see kind of a one-time grant received in the current year, but otherwise they've been kind of either remaining consistent or decreasing over the past 4 or 5 years. So capital grants. So other than in 2015, you pretty much don't receive that many capital grants, and it's been kind of steadily decreasing. So that results in the municipality having to fund your capital projects through other means. So either long-term debt, gas tax funding, or development charges. So again, kind of your capital expenditures for the past 5 years. So kind of lining up with those capital grants, you saw kind of a big capital grant in 2015. And so that is kind of directly in line with that kind of 2 large years, spike years, so both 2015 and 2016, where a significant amount was kind of purchased in those 2 years and has kind of dropped off for the last 3 years. So this shows the kind of where the municipality spends their money in the current year. So you'll see the most significant cost being the police at 23%, followed by water and sewer and general government at 19% and 14% respectively. And then kind of everything else kind of makes up that kind of pieces. So roads would be your 4th highest, and then everything else is a lot lower. So similar to the revenue, this is your expenses between 2015 and 2019. So you'll see that these have been pretty much consistent year over year. There's not really any big changes in the sources and kind of similar breakdown of type. So it is kind of interesting to note that your salaries have remained consistent over the 5 years. So they remain kind of similar at that 53%. So just kind of a high level picture of the last 5 years. So your reserves have been steadily increasing, which is in kind of a result. And so your cash has been increasing as well. Your long-term debt, other than kind of that spike in 2016, has been steadily decreasing with the repayment of long-term debt. And your capital assets have either increased or kind of remained consistent, other than that one kind of off year this year, which is leading to a decrease just due to the wear and tear taken on those assets this year. So then kind of moving away from the financial statements over to your final letter to council. So the status of the audit, it is complete other than a few items. So we are waiting for the approval of the consolidated financial statements by council, hopefully tonight. The receipt of the signed management representation letter. So Carrie will sign that letter once the approval of the financial statements have gone through. And then we are required to do subsequent event review up to the date of the approval. So once the financial statements are approved, we will do that up to today's date. So we conduct our audit in accordance with generally accepted accounting standards, and the object of this audit is to obtain reasonable, not absolute assurance about whether the financial statements are free from material misstatement. So the scope of this work is pretty much consistent with what was kind of laid out in the planning report. And our materiality, which was communicated in the planning report, remained consistent at $264,000. Our audit findings, so we kind of go through a couple of the significant kind of higher risk level areas, and they are management override of controls as well as the revenue recognition of grant revenue. And so we spend, I would say, a little bit more time on these higher risk levels areas. So for management override of controls, we address this risk by looking at unusual journal entries and gaining evidence on pretty much about these journal entries from management, as well as kind of looking at their sources. And then the second high risk level is the revenue recognition of grant revenue. And so to address that risk, we look at all significant government transfers and review all funding agencies for these significant grants to ensure that they are complete and deferred if applicable. I believe that is, so I guess the only final thing is just if any council members are aware of any fraud, we are required to kind of ensure that the council in general, if they are aware of any actual alleged or suspected fraud, does let us know. And so you are welcome to send us an email or give us a phone call if you are aware or become aware of any. I'd just like to thank the team at Town Council. It's definitely been an interesting year with the kind of move to virtual audits, but kind of got everything done, and I kind of put that back onto the team at your town hall for kind of being open and willing and able to kind of take on that challenge. So thank you. Does anybody have any questions for us?
And can we just pull up the regular screen again, Jennifer? I can't see everybody. There we go. Are there any questions for Tracy or Angela? Councilor Bernardo.
When you mentioned that our, I guess, the equipment, we're not spending as much, it's sort of, how do I want to put it? We're not keeping up with the cost. It's depreciating faster than what we're spending. Is that what that's sort of what I incurred in what you were saying. Am I correct in that?
Yeah, so as a general rule, you would like to have the purchases being more than the amortization, because the amortization is your best estimate on how quickly those assets are being amortized. Now, saying that, you also have an in-depth capital asset management plan. So the financial statements are not the best place to monitor your capital assets or to judge exactly what you need. You really have to go to that secondary source, your capital asset management plan, to make sure that you have things planned out for the future and that you have the financing available when those larger projects come up. So like every year you are going to have fluctuations. You'll see from the graphs there that you had large capital purchases in 2015 and 16. And so sometimes you do need to have a lull in your capital purchases while you're saving up for some bigger purchases further along.
So when you say capital assets, you're talking about the whole of the town in the way of capital assets, not necessarily vehicles. It could be roads, could be everything.
Correct.
Okay, that's what I wanted to get an understanding of.
Yeah.
Carrie or Jim, do you want to speak to that at all? I mean, as I understand it, what you're presenting is, more of an accounting function, but, isn't necessarily representative of the actual capital management plan that we have.
And part of it too is that we didn't get some of the grants that we applied for. So part of the capital budget is dependent on whether we receive the funding for it. So we were unsuccessful getting the Connecting Link grant last year. So that the additional capital assets, though they were not replaced in 2019. So for 2020, because we did receive the grant for that, you will see an increase in capital spending for our roads infrastructure. The other thing too that didn't happen that we budgeted for was the delivery of the water truck. It didn't come in 2019, so it doesn't show here as a tangible capital asset, and it will show up in 2020.
I guess the reason for the question, the way I asked it, because it is a combined of our portion of the fire board, the CDRC, the library, as well as the town as a whole. So when and all of the equipment, the reason I asked that is because it's not just the plow trucks and the town equipment, as you mentioned, the water truck and whatnot, but it could also be the fire trucks and on and on and on. And our buildings, Robert Street, the whole thing is all combined in there, not just the one item. That's why I tried to get an understanding. It's the whole of the town, all of our capital assets, period, including our sewage treatment plant and wells. Am I correct in that thought process? That's what's in our report tonight.
Yes, everything.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions? So just so I'm clear, Tracy, you actually want a resolution from us approving these financial statements tonight?
Yes, we cannot release the financial statements until the council has approved it.
Okay. All right. So I'm just going to amend slightly the draft resolution that's included in the agenda. That draft only spoke to receiving them. So we'll amend that to read that be it resolved the council receives and approves the 2019 financial statements from BDO as presented. Do I have a mover and seconder for that? Moved by Councillor Buffett, seconded by Deputy Mayor Anderson. Any further discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? That's carried. Thank you, guys.
Thank you for having us here this evening.
All right, take care.
Thank you.
Okay, next up is a report from the CAO regarding the reopening of Town Hall updates.
Through the mayor, this is a review of the date based on the request of council at the last meeting, where I had presented that we had estimated that we'd originally looked at restart date for the opening of Town Hall based on a revised hours Monday to Friday of Monday, June the 15th. Since that meeting, there has been 2 additional announcements from the province in addition to today's announcement. However, those announcements that we were dealing with were on the 25th of May, where the extension of the emergency order was made. And then there was another announcement on May the 27th, the first one was extending the state of emergency, and the second one was extending the emergency orders. In addition to those 2 issues, we also looked at the timing with respect to the work that we needed to undertake, and therefore recommended that a delay in when we estimated opening would be adjusted from June the 15th to Monday, July the 6th. And that's what the report reflects. There aren't any other additional changes. The additional costs that we've incurred will be summarized through the treasurer's financial report in the next quarterly update, but they are rather insignificant at this point. We had talked about the timing for when council meetings will be in person again, and we can't really estimate that at this time. Today's additional information from the province was based on the gathering quota or number being revised from 5 to 10. That still would not facilitate an in-council person meeting at this time. So the budget that we had provided was based on council meetings originally reinstated in July at the CDRC. That might be mid-July to late July or even August now. So really that's the only thing that we have to look at. And what we'd like to do is the date of July the 6th is reassess it as we get closer to the date, particularly as offices and our type of employment situation are probably going to fall within stage 3 of the province's direction. And we just want to make sure that everything that we're doing with respect to our engagement with the public and our service levels are ultimately the safest that they can be. July the 6th, in follow up to some of the concerns of council at the last meeting, is a more realistic date. And that's what we've recommended through this report. And that concludes this very hopefully short report.
Okay. So let's get the motion on the floor and then we can have a discussion. So the motion reads, be it resolved, the council receives report CAO 2020-05 regarding COVID-19 reopening town hall update and the tentative date for reopening of town hall on Monday, July 6th, 2020 to public access for information. I have a mover and seconder for that. Councillor Fegan, seconded by Councillor Wagner. All right, any discussion or questions for Denise? No? Okay, all in favor? Any opposed? That's carried. All right, Denise, you're up again with a report on the OPP costing proposal and timelines.
Thank you. Through your worship. This report is simply a summary of process in confirmation that the Ontario Provincial Police, who was to provide a second costing to the town of Shelburne, has confirmed that they will present to council on Monday, the 22nd, using an electronic Zoom format, with the meeting starting at 6:30 p.m. This is part of a regularly scheduled meeting and not a special meeting. The OPP have confirmed, as they indicated through the process, that a public Q&A or question and answer period or information session will also be held shortly thereafter, and that date has been confirmed as Tuesday, July the 7th. That too will be an electronic Zoom format starting at 6:30 p.m. Through the clerk, the process how questions can be asked of the OPP in advance so that they can all be categorized and ready to be asked of the OPP is being outlined, and I can let Jennifer speak to that later on when to be ready. But we do require that you register for the Zoom meeting to participate. And that is about privacy and protection, because I'm sure that many people will recognize that there were some challenges with the past meetings, not our meetings in particular, but when Zoom originally became a very relevant platform for meetings, they were called Zoom bombing. And by virtue of the open format or the meeting link that was promoted in social media or public space, web pages, for example, people have the access to get into the meeting. So again, we'll speak to that. Additionally, the third element of this is the public engagement, which will commence tomorrow on a survey format, similar to the last session when we did the costing. There'll be a series of questions for our members of public to provide their input to council, as well as open-ended comment areas. That will run till approximately July the 5th or 6th, so that we have time to prepare the responses. Those are the three elements of the update for the costing proposal. And as was asked in the past, in terms of the chronology that was attached to the March report, there are a number of stages within the OPP process. In March, we were at step 3. Now, as we start this 22nd of June presentation from the OPP, that takes us to step 6. And from the moment that the presentation is received, council has 6 months to provide a response to the OPP, which would take you to June or December 22nd. So in summary, just so again, I'll reiterate, there's three key elements of the process right now. The OPP costing will be presented to council electronically on Monday, June the 22nd. The OPP will be presenting their responses through a question and answer community information session on Tuesday, July the 7th. And additionally, there'll be a public engagement process that will commence through a survey tomorrow and run for approximately 3 weeks. That concludes my update on the costing process for the Ontario Provincial Police.
Okay. So the draft motion that's contained in the agenda, again, just speaks to receiving the report for information. I'd like to add to that slightly. So I'll go ahead and move the following motion And then I'll look for a seconder. Be it resolved, the council receives report CAO 2020-06 regarding Ontario Provincial Police update on the costing proposal and timing for information, and that the OPP's costing proposal presentation is confirmed for June 22nd, 2020, and that council directs staff to provide a report at the July 13th, 2020 council meeting in follow-up to the OPP's costing proposal of June 22nd. A seconder for that?
I'll second it.
So moved by Mills, seconded by Benotto. Basically, I just want staff to have some direction to move this along and get back with a report on the 13th. Any discussion on that or questions from for Denise in terms of the timing, or questions for Jennifer in terms of process?
Just a quick question. Denise, if we, as a council, I know they extended it to the end of June as far as the order, but if he does not extend it any longer, do we lose the electronic meeting process?
Through the mayor, no.
So how long are we don't know how long the province is going to allow us to continue meeting electronically.
I'm going to turn that over to the clerk because she's dealing with AMCTO and some of there's a number of requests being made. So I guess maybe no, my no is more of a maybe. There's a number of requests being right now so that the extension as a component of the emergency declaration would not be discontinued, because many communities say the electronic format is very beneficial. I know that a number of us have talked about the electronic format being very necessary, particularly in inclement weather, and how that would really support communities of the north, for example, when there's snowstorms and other, I guess, weather situations that preempt you from meeting. So Jennifer, would you mind just addressing that?
Yes, council can only meet by way of electronic participation during a declared emergency, whether it be provincial or municipal. Beyond the declared emergency, you can participate electronically. However, we do require 4 bodies in attendance at an in-person meeting to be considered as quorum.
Yeah, so I understand that part. I always understood that part. That's why I'm saying the declared emergency right now by the province is until the end of June. If he does not pass it beyond that, then 4 of us have to come bodily together at some point in time to make a quorum. Even the rest participate electronically, but they can't vote either, can they? They can only participate.
Through the mayor, keep in mind that we also have a municipal emergency declaration. So as long as the municipal emergency declaration remains in place, we can meet electronically.
So through you back to the mayor, I guess we better declare it for the rest of the year so we can continue.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, we'll have to see what happens at the provincial level, but you know, certainly what has been happening is, you know, every couple of weeks they're extending. So whether that'll go beyond the end of June or not, you know, it is anybody's guess at this point. But as the clerk points out, you know, we are also under a local declaration of emergency as well, and you know, we have autonomy ourselves to determine how long or short-lived that remains. So
Just need to address. Wait.
yeah, Denise.
To Walter Benotto's question, or Councillor Benotto's question, the other challenge we would have if we had to return to an in-person meeting in July for the OPP community information session, even though we've identified the town and country room at the CDRC, we would be able to potentially accommodate if we had the interest in attendance that we had in Grace Tippling Hall, which then reinforces how critical it is to have an electronic format to allow people to participate, as we currently can accommodate 100 or more people through the Zoom meetings, which we accommodate in a physical meeting at CDRC.
All right, any other discussion or questions? Does anybody want me to read the motion again? Okay, all right, so I'll call the question. All in favor? Any opposed? That's carried. Okay, so next we have a report from the clerk regarding the appointment of Municipal Community Emergency Management Coordinator. Jennifer?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So this is a simple housekeeping item. Last October, the county had notified us that the fire chief had been appointed the alternate CEMC for the county and Mr. Murphy. So accordingly, staff, being myself and the deputy registrar, we took the formal training through the Office of the Fire Marshal and Emergency Management Ontario. As luck would have it, we received our certification on March 3rd of this year, just a few short days prior to the current pandemic situation and emergency declaration. So we are legislatively required to have a municipal emergency management coordinator. Thus the appointment being recommended in my report tonight. So I'll keep it short and simple. And back to you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. So we have a motion that reads, be it resolved that report LS 2020-02 from the clerk regarding the appointment of Community Emergency Management Coordinator be received for information, and that the Council of the Town of Shelburne appoints the Director of Legislative Services / Clerk as the Community Emergency Management Coordinator for the Town of Shelburne, and that the Deputy Registrar / Project Coordinator be appointed as an alternative replacement in the absence of the clerk being able to fulfill the role. The mover and seconder for that. Moved by Councillor Fegan, seconded by Councillor Wagner. And just to clarify, the Deputy Registrar Project Coordinator is Patty Hosey. So you will be appointed as the primary and Patty will be the alternate. Okay.
Correct.
Any discussion on that motion? All in favor? Opposed? Great. Okay, are there any notices of motion this evening?
Deputy Mayor.
Sorry, guys. Yeah, so I do have one, Wade. And I guess when we get to council inquires, I have a few items as well. So at that point, I would ask for everyone's indulgence. When it comes to the notice of motion, I'm going to ask for council's indulgence or permission to dispense of the bylaw in order to get this notice of motion to be dealt with today. Before I get into that, I do want to thank the mayor for his leadership when it comes to acknowledging the pain that many people are feeling when it comes to the acts of discrimination and racism, whether in our community and certainly beyond the borders of our community. I could certainly say that I personally appreciate, and I know members of the community as well appreciate, his commitment to listening, which is very important. And just as important, if not more important, the willingness to take immediate action, because I think we all could agree that inaction is no longer acceptable. So with that, the mayor and I have spoken about how we could go about bringing forth that change. I brought forward to the mayor the idea of striking a task force, which we would have members appointed, and I'll run through the names that I've discussed with the mayor. And this task force would be focused on anti-Black racism and discrimination in general. The task force would have a 2-month reporting window where they would discuss ideas and solutions and ultimately make recommendations to council at the end of the 2-month period. At that point, council would then consider these recommendations for adoption. And if we do adopt, whether in part or in full, the recommendations, the idea would then be to update our strategic plan in order to have those included and to obviously make those a priority. and ensure that we allocate, if necessary, any resources, whether financially or otherwise, to ensure that these actions are taking place. So the names that have been chosen, or at least being brought forward, is key in the sense that when it comes to issues of discrimination and racism, I think it's important, and I think we all could agree, that we actually listen to the people who are certainly experiencing these unfortunate I guess, acts, if I may put it that way. So it's important to listen and to hear from individuals, and then to act upon what is being said. And so with that, we have 9 names that we are putting forward for the appointment for this task force, and I'll just read them as follows. And if Jennifer, if you need me to repeat or to slow down, or for spellings on some, I'm happy to do that. So the first is Alethea O'Hara Stevenson, which I am recommending that she chair the committee. The second individual is Gear Harvey. The third individual is Chief Moore. And I should say that all these individuals have been consulted, and they've all agreed to participate if approved by council. Again, Chief Moore. The fourth individual is Ken Topping. The fifth individual is Althea Casamento. The sixth individual is Bella Carter. And we also felt that it was important to have a young contingent participating on this task force. So there are 3 young individuals, I believe 2 or 3, but let me just see here. So one is Cheyenne Riki, and for those who may not know, this is the individual, one of the individuals that is responsible for organizing the peaceful walk that the mayor referenced at I believe at the beginning of the meeting on June 14th, which he confirmed his attendance, and I'll be attending as well. So Cheyenne Riki. The other young individual is Soha Solomon. And the last individual for consideration on this task force is Simran Bamu. So these are individuals, I believe, represent a cross section of the community. And again, it has individuals at various different stages that I believe that will add value to the discussion, and again, report back to council. So that's the task force. When it comes to, again, because it is a notice of motion, obviously this would probably be heard, or would likely be heard at the next meeting, but I'm asking for that to be dispensed of by way of the bylaw, and that we could make a decision on this today.
So, Your Worship, if I would, we need a motion to dispense with our procedural bylaw, and we need, I believe, 2/3 of the council to approve it, if I'm correct. And not
Unanimous consent.
I mean, or unanimous consent. I think I'd like to make a motion, if the deputy mayor is agreeable with me, that we dispense with our procedural bylaw. We don't need a motion to do that. We just need to ask for that to happen.
Just consent.
Just consent. Then we should have consent to dispense with it. So we should be able to deal with that motion that the deputy mayor has brought forward tonight. I think it's important.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Deputy Mayor, did you actually pen a formal resolution?
I didn't pen one, but certainly I'm willing to do that. Or
with something sort of on the fly, so the clerk can just record a resolution for the minutes.
You want me to sort of think of it right now on my feet and just sure. Sure. I guess that council agree that the establishment of the anti-Black racism and discrimination task force be adopted for the purpose of tackling, for the purpose of recommending to council, I don't know, ideas to tackle racism and discrimination in our community.
And then I might just suggest that we add a further statement and further that the following individuals be appointed to form that task force.
Thank you. Yes.
And I'll second that motion.
Okay. You good, Jennifer? Okay. All right. So the motion's on the floor. It's been moved and seconded. Are there any objections to allowing this question to be called tonight as opposed to being presented as a notice of motion that won't be voted on until the next meeting? Raise your hand if there's an objection. Okay, not seeing any. Any questions or comments on the motion?
I think that the timing of this motion is excellent. This is something that consistently in this community, unfortunately, we hear there is still racism within the community. As a matter of fact, the deputy mayor reminded me just recently about when we were campaigning, how one individual was receiving my material but refused to receive his material. And it's just simple things like that that hurt people. And racism, unfortunately, if we don't start, it starts within the household. And if we don't start with the youth and break them of that level of racism, it'll just continue on and on and on. So I think that whatever recommendations that task force brings back to us, something we've got to act on and work with.
Okay. Deputy Mayor, just one question. In our discussions earlier about this, you had mentioned that you and I would take part in this as well. Is it your vision that we would essentially sit as like ex officio members, more or less as observers, being able to contribute, but we won't, in essence, have a vote, for lack of a better term, on the task force?
Yeah, I agree. By no means do I want to be directing the discussions or imposing sort of our beliefs on the discussion. But yes, I would agree as to the way you characterize it. Yes.
Okay. Any further comments? Okay, we'll call the question. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion's carried. Okay. Are there any other notices of motion? Okay, council inquiries.
If anybody doesn't have any, I have a couple of items, but I'm here to wait if anybody wants to go first.
I've got one, but that's okay, Steve. I'll go after you.
All right, thanks, Kyle. I guess just, well, actually, I'll take a bit of a deviation from what I just discussed on the notice of motion. And so this is for Denise or Jennifer or staff. I'm just wondering if you could just let me know or let us know, what is the status of 420 Victoria? Are we still, I believe there were some timelines that were provided the last time we discussed this. Are we still, obviously there's the pandemic and that may have slowed things down, but maybe if you could just let us know where we are with respect to any proposed timelines that we may have received before. Are we sort of still on target or has that been set back to some degree?
Denise?
Through the mayor, deputy mayor, we're set back at the moment. We're still dealing with some excavation issues. I anticipate that we'll be providing council with an update at the end of July or early August on that particular site and where we're going to be going in terms of next steps.
Okay, perfect. Just two more items, Al, if you don't mind, or is that okay?
Go right ahead, man.
All right, thank you. Jennifer, there's, if you don't mind pulling up that photograph that I sent.
Can everyone see that?
Mhm.
Yep.
Yeah, okay.
This is, I came across this on my Facebook feed. Many of you may have seen this as well. This young and talented artist, Brooklyn Higgins, I believe is her name. And when I saw this, I mean, I was certainly moved as Councillor Walter Bernardo spoke of about these discussions being timely. And this was sort of her way of adding her voice to the many voices who are standing against racism and discrimination. And I thought this was such a beautiful piece. I had reached out to her mother via Facebook to ask her whether, if approved by council, whether we could maybe have this painting, this beautiful painting, displayed at Town Hall. And so I wanted to, you can remove this now, Jennifer, thanks. I just wanted to bring this to council's attention. And I don't know whether we require any sort of formal motion on this, but I just put it on the table for discussion and any comments with respect to, I guess, my request, if I may put it that way, to have this displayed at Town Hall.
So the thought comes to my mind that it could be displayed in the gallery outside of council chambers, depending upon how long the artist wants to part with it. I mean, it's not going to do much good for the time being when we're not actually meeting here in person. But I mean, if she's willing to, kind of put it out on loan for a longer period of time, I think, we could hang it up there. Jennifer, yeah. Do we require any sort of formal approval of that?
No, the Town Hall Gallery Committee has art up there, but I'm quite certain they would be susceptible to switching out some artwork for that piece, yes.
Okay.
Just a thought, we could take down the fiddler painting that we have on the downstairs going up the stairs. That's area. We don't have a fiddle contest, unfortunately, or a heritage contest this year. Maybe you could go there for a little bit of time.
It's interesting you say that, Councilor Bernardo, because I was thinking of maybe having it downstairs, more visible in the lobby, and for the very reason that many people who access the building don't make their way upstairs, and to really have the impact that I believe that it ought to have. In my view, it should be visible for those who walk into the building. But again, I'll leave that up for consideration by all, but I think it would have more and greater impact there.
Denise, did I see your hand up?
I think the library potentially is going to reopen sooner than us. I know that they're looking at curbside, so there potentially maybe a joint type of profile that if they open earlier, that in their entrance, it could be positioned there first, particularly they've done a lot with respect to Black History Month. And then following that, when we reopen, that then it could be transferred to our lobby. I don't anticipate the second floor opening in the near future either, because obviously Grace Tippling Hall and the council chambers won't be able to accommodate a lot of people. But certainly the library might be a venue that'll be open sooner than us, even now with the curbside pickup, just to give it profile. And they could incorporate in their outreach and their communications, the background on the piece.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. And thanks for that, Denise. And the very last item, and again, thanks, Kyle, for your patience, is I guess now going back to sort of the sentiments I expressed in the notice of motion about taking action. I also think it's important, I know, to acknowledge, as the mayor did so candidly, about what he could do to be better. And certainly I could do a lot to be better as well. And I'm sure all of us would agree. And I thought it would be appropriate if we were to have an individual come in and maybe provide, whether it was an hour or so, presentation on the impacts of racism and discrimination and challenging perceptions and biases. And I think as leaders in the community, we have to demonstrate what we say at the top level. And I think we could all benefit, each and every one of us, from an educational piece as such. And so I would be recommending that if somebody's asking, well, where would that money come from? I know that many of us were planning to maybe travel to Ottawa for educational pieces or seminars as we were accustomed to doing. As a result of the pandemic, obviously, that money is not being used because of the cancellations. And so there's an opportunity to have somebody come in and have it funded out of that portfolio, which I think would add tremendous value to all of us.
Okay. Steve, you and I had spoken briefly today, and you said there was somebody in particular that you had in mind. Could you maybe forward that name along to staff and can kind of get some details on what that speaking engagement might look like?
Absolutely.
Okay. Just to circle back one step to the artwork. How do you want to leave that? You've been in touch with the artist's mother?
Yeah, I've been in touch with the artist's mother. She confirmed that her daughter would be excited, Brooklyn would be excited to have the piece on loan to us to display. And I'm certain that she would be excited to hear that it'd be a joint venture, as Denise has suggested, with the library and town hall. So I did say to her that if this went forward today, that I would circle back with her to provide her with the decision of council.
Okay. Denise?
Just to clarify that at this point, the earliest that we would display the piece would be as of July the 6th, based on the date that was performed tonight or approved. And then I guess it would be in consultation with the library CEO, what could happen now. If they say no, it wouldn't work either, then potentially it could be afterwards at town hall, it could go to the library. But at the same time, the library could still share information virtually with their education programs on this and start to, I guess, give a higher profile to the background.
So just with that, Denise, when I'm circling back with the family, should I put them in contact with staff so that it's organized? Because I'm assuming you probably need some time to maybe speak to the people at the library, or whether maybe I should be doing that. So is that okay?
Yeah, sure. So if you just let them know that at a minimum that we're happy to display it in the main entrance on the first floor as of July the 6th.
Okay.
And if you send me the information and the contact, I'll certainly follow up with the library CEO to ask what's potentially possible at the library, either before that date or after that date. And then we can set up a schedule in place. And then we can ask the libraries if there's anything they could do to promote and share information as part of their electronic education program.
Thank you.
Okay. Jennifer?
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, just one more thing. We also have easels here. So instead of taking down replacement art, I think it would be best that we place it on an easel right at front entrance, so it's visible right front and center.
Perfect.
You can put
Thank you.
What was that, Councilor Bernardo? Sorry.
Put it in front of the elevator. We can't go upstairs anyway.
Yeah. All right. Councilor has been waiting patiently.
Well, thanks, guys. I just wanted to give you an update on the, I guess what we'll call it is the community COVID commemoration, commemoration art project with the Canada flag that we're looking to put together. We've secured all of the project pieces. We've got all the parts together. We are putting the flag together. Tomorrow we're assembling physically what the wood pieces are going to be. We as a committee have been talking about potentially using June 20th, if that would work. And I'm going to put that to staff and ask, would that be a good date for us to set this up? What we'd like to do is, if that works, we'd like to book the town hall parking lot to be used for the community to line up and put their hands on the flag to actually create this thing. And from there, then once it's been assembled and built and painted, if we could also have it hung in Jack Downing Park. Now, one other thing that we were also talking about, and maybe Jennifer, you could help us out with this, is we would like to extend an invitation out to both our MP and our MPP to see if they might be willing to participate in the event as well. I think it might be a nice gesture at the same time as well.
So June 20th is a Saturday, right?
It is a Saturday, yeah. So we figured that was probably going to be the easiest to get most of the community out and probably the less traffic for town hall as well.
Okay. We have our emergency control group meeting tomorrow at 11:30. I'll ask the police chief about that, because I mean, police will be the only ones really that will be using the parking lot on a Saturday. Right or wrong, Jennifer?
That's correct, but one thing I'm not sure of with vehicles parked in the lot, if there's enough room that we can maintain that physical distancing requirement.
Could we maybe extend the cars that would be in that lot normally? Can we move them across the road to the municipal parking lot?
The municipal parking lot has paid parking permits, so we cannot take away from those that have paid to park in those other lots.
Have you ever thought, Kyle, of moving it up to the pavilion up at the park by Highland
Just
Heights?
saying.
Yeah.
We originally discussed that was the original plan, but then Brian brought the point together that there's a lot of the community who can't drive, and that is a significant distance out there. And as our Canada Day event has gone, and we've constantly heard issues where people can't make it out to the festivities because it's so far out, we thought that if we could move it to the middle of town somewhere, it would be easier for the community.
Councilor Bernardo was referring to Natasha Patterson Park.
Oh,
That's what I was thinking of, yeah. But why not move it to the Jack Downey Park underneath the pavilion right there?
yeah.
And have it done right there, because you've got the two walkways leading up to it, and you can separate people going back from keep the social distancing.
It's not a bad idea.
Yeah, it's down the line.
Okay. Well, we'll fine tune details on location, but yeah, we've got a date, and we'll make something work. So.
Okay. Terrific. The last thing that I would request, if we could, is we'd like to use the digital boards as well, if possible, just to make sure that the community is well aware. And if possible, put it on the town website as well. We'll certainly put together some media for you, Jennifer, if that's easier. But if we could have permission for that, we'd like to make sure that we get as much exposure for this as possible.
And Kyle, talk to Carol and get it on the radio.
Oh, absolutely. I'm already going to be talking to My FM as well as Country 105 as well.
So the media, social media stuff and LED sign stuff, Jennifer, that should go to Carol?
That's correct, yes. And unfortunately, given the current workload, it may be required that you create your own artwork so that it's a simple upload for her.
It's already done. Not a problem.
That shouldn't be a problem, right? Okay. All right. Good. Anything else? That was it?
That's all I've got. Thank you very much.
Okay. Any other inquiries? No? Okay. So on to communications. There's a number of items listed there. Is there anything that anybody wants to deal with independently? No? Okay.
Unless we're getting good broadband in the town.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. So can I get a motion to receive items listed under 8.0 communications for information? Councillor Fegan, seconded by Councillor Buffett. All in favor? It's carried. Confirming bylaw, be it resolved that leave be given for the reading and enacting of bylaw number 28-2020, being a bylaw to confirm certain proceedings of the Council of the Corporation of the Town of Shelburne for its special council meeting held July 8th, 2020. Moved by Donato, seconded by Hall. All in favor? Carried. And finally, be it resolved that we now adjourn to meet at the call of the mayor. Moved by Deputy Mayor Anderson, seconded by Councillor Buffett. All in favor? Any opposed to that one? Carried. Great. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Enjoy the rest of the evening. Looks nice out there.
All right, bye, everybody.
Yeah.